Hello everyone, Ruslan Belov here. This morning in Kiev was extremely loud. Kinzhals and calibers came in, attack drones as well. Everything is covered in smoke and fire. Now, let's move on to the situation at the front. Let's switch to the map. But first, friends, I'd like to say a few words about the situation in the Middle East, because something very serious is developing there that could affect everyone. So what do we have here? Israel, having decided that Iran poses a threat, started bombing it. Even though Iran hadn't touched Israel, there was no attack. They simply decided to start bombing on their own. Netanyahu figured that a moment like this, when Iran's borders are basically wide open to Israeli air forces, might not come again soon. So he decided to destroy all nuclear reactors, eliminate the top military leadership, and so on. The calculation was that chaos would break out. The regime would collapse or retreat into a corner and surrender. But the Iranian regime is holding on. No one hid in a corner, no one surrendered. And instead, they bit back. And bit back hard. Strikes hit a power plant in Haifa. I posted a photo on my Telegram channel. And an oil refinery in Haifa as well. Several air defense systems were destroyed, many buildings in the capital were damaged, dozens of people were killed, and Netanyahu ran crying to Daddy, meaning the United States. He started begging for help, and yesterday the US deployed 24 refueling aircraft from the States. Today, the US Secretary of Defense announced that additional forces are being deployed to the Middle East. Meanwhile, Trump interrupted the G7 meeting and flew home, convening his National Security Council. According to an Israeli TV channel, the decision for the US to join the war against Iran has already been made. So just look at the situation. Israel attacked first, got punched in the face, and now called on someone stronger to beat up Iran. It's about as unfair as it gets, right? If you started the fight, then fight it yourself. It's hard, painful, you take hits. But then maybe you shouldn't have started it in the first place. In short, now they're going to hit Iran together. It will be difficult for Iran. I hope they hold out. Because if the regime collapses, the Americans will immediately install a puppet government, and that will be one less ally for Russia. The last country in the region with an independent foreign policy will fall. This could lead to the division of Iran and chaos across the region. And let's not forget the economic side. Iran has enormous gas and oil reserves, and the Americans would love for their companies to be the ones extracting them. Now, let's get to the Ukrainian front. What's happened in the past 24 hours? We've seen another advance on the Siversk direction. If you've been closely following the updates, you'll notice that what was once a nearly dead sector has suddenly come to life. This is the third day in a row with progress. Now, from the recently captured Hrihorivka, just 3 days ago, the troops have begun advancing towards Serebryanka. A gain of 1.1 kilometers was made here. Only about 500 meters remain to reach the village of Serebryanka. So we expect news in the coming days about entering the village and the beginning of fighting. There have already been attempts to enter, but no foothold has yet been established. Capturing Serebryanka is extremely important for the future operation in Siversk. From there, we gain access to the city's outskirts from the north. Just to give you an idea, the distance from Serebryanka to Siversk is only 3.5 kilometers. This would create a very unfavorable situation for the Ukrainian armed forces, where we would be only 4 kilometers from the city from the east, also a short distance, and 3.5 kilometers from the north. That leaves only the south, which we'll need to push to form a semi-encirclement. So things are getting very interesting here. Let's continue with other developments on the front. As for timelines, it's impossible to predict anything on the Siversk direction. I explained why in yesterday's video. Over the past year, we gained control of 6 square kilometers along the entire Siversk front. That's in a whole year. But now, in the past 3 days alone, we've advanced 8 square kilometers here. So in 3 days, Russian forces took more ground than in the entire previous year. That's why I won't make any predictions. Serebryanka is a medium-sized village. Before the war, over 1,000 people lived there. But it's well fortified. The main goal is to take the height at the eastern entrance. Let me even turn on the terrain layer so it's clearer. You can see the elevation from the east, and the village itself is down in a low area. That height is the key to the village. If you take the high ground and establish positions there, the rest is just a matter of technique. You fire down into the village, Infantry moves in, and that's it. But for now, those heights remain under the control of the Ukrainian armed forces. So, we're not even talking about a full assault yet. The most that's happened is a reconnaissance group entering, but as I said, nothing came of it. Let's move on. In the past 24 hours, there have also been shifts in the Chassiv Yar area, specifically to the north of the city. Inside Chassiv Yar itself, heavy fighting continues, especially in the Shevchenko district, which was entered just a day ago. To the north, we've advanced 800 meters and crossed the Siversk-Donetsk-Donbass Canal. I mentioned recently that the next goal here is the village of Maiske. We're approaching it from the south and now from the east as well. Capturing Maiske will allow us to move on to Verolyubivka, and that opens up a path for a full encirclement of Kostiantynivka from the north. Now about Stepov. Despite claims, even official ones from the Ministry of Defense, we do not yet have full control, and frankly we can't, not until all surrounding heights are under our control. I've shown this before, but let me show it again for clarity. Look at the terrain. There are elevations on both sides, and the village sits in a depression. You can call it a hollow, a basin. The point is, it's low, and you can't control a village if you don't control the heights. Even if you somehow manage to enter, you'll immediately be taken out. You're fully exposed. You'll be shot like at a shooting range. So the problem of Stepov is the problem of the high ground. And until that's resolved, and it's being resolved as slowly and painfully as everything around Chassiv Yar, there's no point predicting anything. Who would have thought the assault on Chassiv Yar would drag on for more than a year? And that during that time we'd even manage to capture Toretsk? Unlikely. The assault on Chassiv Yar began in March 2024. We entered Toretsk only in July, closer to August really. Since then we've taken Toretsk and made progress across the area, but Chassiv Yar still isn't fully under our control. Let's move on. Yesterday we also had an advance on the eastern flank of Mirnohrad, although strictly speaking it's probably incorrect to refer to it as the eastern flank of Mirnohrad, since this is clearly part of the Kostiantynivka axis. Anyway, in the southern sector of the Kostiantynivka direction, Russian forces advanced by 1 kilometer along the T-0504 highway, heading directly toward the city of Kostiantynivka. In addition, they also moved forward 500 meters into the residential area of the village of Yablonivka. And this is very important, because Yablonivka is a key defensive node of the Ukrainian armed forces, one that has been preventing further Russian movement toward the city. Yablonivka and Oleksandra Klinova, two villages, two major Ukrainian defensive strongholds. After them, as you can see, the path to Kostiantynivka is effectively open. This is currently where the most intense fighting is taking place. The Ukrainian armed forces have pulled in reserves and are holding on as best they can. Nevertheless, the pressure is slowly pushing through, and on the far eastern flank of Mirnohrad, there are also developments. Even Ukrainian cartographers are now showing, if not control, then at least a grey zone in the area of Koptova. In the Novopavlivka area, the Russian army has managed to push deeper into the Dnipropetrovsk region. The settlement of Novopavlivka is currently located about 5.5 kilometers from the Russian forward positions. There is also good news from the Sumy direction. The Russian advance in Yunakivka continues, and most of the settlement is already under Russian control, which is also confirmed by the Ukrainian Deep State Mapping Service. In addition, Russian forces have entered the village of Mala Korchakivka, and that is already the second line of defense before reaching the city of Sumy. That's it for territorial gains in the past 24 hours. Frankly speaking, they were weak. A day earlier, 22 square kilometers had come under Russian control. Over the past 24 hours, only 5 square kilometers. That's the lowest result since April, but there's no need to panic or assume the army is stuck. Just a day before, it was 22 square kilometers. That's life on the front. One day, 22, the next, 5, and then maybe 30 again. The important thing is that our guys are pushing forward, while the Ukrainian armed forces are finding it increasingly difficult to hold the line each month. Now let's talk a bit about politics. Iran has informed mediators that it will not engage in negotiations as long as Israeli strikes continue, according to Reuters. The outlet's source says the Iranians told mediators from Qatar and Oman that they refused to negotiate while under attack. The source also denied media reports that Iran had asked Oman and Qatar to involve the US in brokering a ceasefire or resuming nuclear negotiations. Meanwhile, the US is massively deploying refueling aircraft to Europe, reports Military Watch. The publication notes an unprecedented transfer of US aerial refueling tankers from American bases toward Europe. The number of deployed aircraft exceeds 30. It's noted that the refueling planes may be used to support Israeli or US combat aircraft in case of further escalation with Iran. The US is also reportedly participating in the defense of Israel, deploying missile defense systems and destroyers to intercept Iranian missiles. Another night of mutual missile strikes between Israel and Iran has passed. So far, Israel and its allies are conditionally winning. But as the saying goes, the game is still on. Tehran has not been broken. Anything is possible in such situations, as noted by the Legitimy Telegram channel. The most intriguing developments are taking place in Kiev, where Zelensky is jumping out of his skin, trying to get noticed again and be written about. Yesterday, he began spreading claims that the Kremlin is preparing to strike Ukrainian nuclear power plants. He hoped this would win back favor from his sponsors. We'll keep watching. Ukraine, together with Britain, is preparing a provocation in the Baltic Sea aimed at disrupting Russian-American negotiations, according to Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service, SVR. One scenario, according to intelligence sources, involves staging a fake Russian torpedo attack on a US Navy vessel. Soviet or Russian-made torpedoes have already been handed over to the British by the Ukrainian side. The plan is for some of them to explode at a safe distance from a US ship, while one dud will be recovered and presented to the public as evidence, in quotes, of malicious Russian activity. Ukrainian special forces are reportedly ready to carry out this plan. Another scenario, the SVR says, involves fishing up Russian-made naval mines in the Baltic, allegedly laid for sabotage along international shipping lanes. Again, this was stated by Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service. The Americans have clearly overestimated Israel's strike capabilities and underestimated Iran's combat potential, said military analyst Alexander Krolenko in a comment to Sputnik Live. That's why, in the foreseeable future, the Israeli military operation called Right to Self-Defense will not achieve its objectives, even if the US armed forces become directly involved. In just 3 days of combat, hundreds of ballistic missiles and strike drones have hit military sites and command centers in both Iran and Israel. However, many forget 3 important things: Iran's ongoing efforts to bury strategic military infrastructure deeper underground, the high combat resilience of Iranian forces, and Iran's territory is 75 times larger than Israel's. It's obvious who takes denser hits and who is more vulnerable. It's also worth noting that Israel's Iron Dome system is being penetrated fairly easily by, quote-unquote, simple ballistic and hypersonic missiles from Iran. Concern is growing in the West. Israel is beginning to resemble Gaza. The question is, who has greater endurance? It's long been known that money is the nerve and muscle of war. With similar-sized economies, Iran's population is 89 million, 9.5 times larger than Israel's 9.4 million. The current size of their armed forces, mobilization capacity, and acceptable critical loss thresholds are simply not comparable. Trump previously gave a harsh assessment of the Kiev regime's competence. When you start a war, you should know that you can win it, right? You don't start a war against someone 20 times larger than you, hoping you'll get missiles. Unfortunately, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu never received such wise advice from Washington. By the way, at the G7 summit, Trump criticized Western countries for excluding Russia from the group. The G7 used to be the G8. Barack Obama and a guy named Trudeau didn't want to let Russia in. That was a mistake. Because I think this war wouldn't be happening if Russia were part of the group. You're spending all this time talking about Russia, but they're not even at the table. That makes everything harder. Thank you for being with me, friends. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss upcoming updates. Take care of yourselves. We'll keep our finger on the pulse. See you soon.